Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible, and we're now up to Leviticus 24, making progress through this awful book. Lawrence, as our resident expert, what opening or synopsis would you start with?
In this upcoming chapter, we're going to have some callbacks to some stuff that we saw in Exodus. It has been an ongoing debate which one came first, but we'll talk about that, and we're not going to solve it. That's not something we can really do on this show. But yeah, there has been a debate on which one came first. Is one an expansion of the other, or is one of the story built off of the other? So
God likes to repeat himself an awful lot and never tell us anything important.
Well, specifically for these, one of them might be important. The other one is related to the bread of
the bread of
the presence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
God just really likes echoes.
And to hear himself talk and bread.
I also have an
And bread.
introduction to this chapter, supplemented by Levine. He writes, Chapter 24 is a brief collection of diverse religious laws concerning the kindling of lamps in the sanctuary, the rows of bread displayed before God in the sanctuary, and laws concerning blasphemy and other serious crimes. A number of other features of this chapter warrant special comment. There is, first of all, a statement on the law of retaliation, lex talionis, similar to what we find in Exodus 21, verses 23 to 25, and Deuteronomy 19:21. In addition, verses 10 to 12 preserve a didactic narrative about an incident of blasphemy, which serves as a background to the legislation on the subject. This recorded incident occasions two further items of interest: a reference to incarceration as a form of detention, and a divine revelation that was needed for an immediate purpose.
Okay.
Good start.
In other words, they get to murder someone for God as a test case.
If only God would, drop in and do the revelation thing every now and then these days, then we'd have a lot fewer questions.
Yeah, but probably
Indeed.
a lot more murder.
What?
I can start reading 24 if you guys want my crazy Catholic Bible.
You can finish this chapter, actually, because it's 23 verses long.
Okay, so just 24?
Unless I decide to interrupt, which I may do at any time.
It is your channel.
All right. Complementary ritual prescriptions is what it's called. The perpetual flame. Yahweh spoke to Moses. He said, order the sons of Israel to bring you pure olive oil for the lampstand and keep a flame burning there continually. Outside the veil of testimony in the tent of meeting, Aaron is to see this flame. It shall burn there before Yahweh from evening to morning continually. This is the perpetual law for your descendants. Aaron is to see the lamp on the pure lampstand before Yahweh continually. Bread on the golden table. You are to take within wheaten flour, and with it bake what's it called? Oh, bake 12 cobs. Whatever, I'm not sure what cob is.
Well, that's the corn once you eat the corn off it.
It's those round loaves. Think of a traditional sourdough loaf.
Oh,
they're scored round loaves. That's a cob.
I see. Okay, so each of 2/10 of an ephah. Then you must set them in rows of 2 and in 6 on the pure table that stands before Yahweh. On each row you shall place pure incense, for this will be the food offered as a memorial, a burnt offering for Yahweh. Continually, every Sabbath there shall be set before Yahweh, and the sons of Israel are to provide them by unending covenant. They will belong to Aaron and his sons, who then shall eat them in a holy place, for they are a most holy portion for him of Yahweh's burnt offerings. This is the perpetual law. A case of blasphemy and the law of retaliation. There is a man whose mother was an Israelite woman and whose father was an Egyptian. Ooh, it's getting steamy. He came out of his house, and in the camp, surrounded by the sons of Israel, he began to quarrel with a man who was an Israelite. Now, This son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name and cursed it. So they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomith. Is that right? Shelomith?
Shalomit.
Is that Shelomit, daughter of Divrey, the tribe of Dan.
Daughter of Debris.
Divrey.
Yeah, something like that. He was put under guard until the will of Yahweh should have been made him clear to them. Yahweh then spoke to Moses, and he said, "Take the man who pronounced the curse outside the camp. Let all who have heard him lay their hands on his head, and let the whole community stone him. Then say to the sons of Israel, any man who curses his God shall bear the burden of thus his fault. The one who blasphemes the name of Yahweh must die. The whole community must stone him, strangle, and stranger the narrative, it's blasphemies the name, and he dies. If a man strikes down any human being,
Wait,
he must die."
Sorry, you said strangle. You meant stranger, I think.
I did, and I thought that was funny because I was
Mhm.
okay.
Okay.
I like strangle the native, but that's because it's horrifying. All right, anyway,
It's all the snakes around.
it must be
Snakes.
yes, the
Yeah.
snakes. All right, so if a man strikes an animal down, then he must make restitution for it. For a life is a life. If a man injures his neighbor, then what he has done must be done to him. Broken limb for broken. This is the law of Hammurabi. Good grief.
That's
Eye for an
Legislationis,
eye,
yes.
tooth for a tooth.
Yep.
As the injury infected, so must be the injury suffered. The one who strikes an animal down must make restitution for it, and the one who strikes down a man must die. Well, he just repeated himself. The
Yes,
sentence
but,
you pass shall be the same, whether it be on native or on stranger. For I am Yahweh, your God.
I'm Rick
When-
James, bitch.
Jeez, right. When Moses said that this is the sons of Israel, then they took the man who had pronounced the curse out of the camp and stoned him. In this way, the sons of Israel cried out the order of Yahweh to Moses. End of chapter.
Yep. So they were really upset with atheists back then, and anybody that doesn't just buy into the fantasy, because that's all this is. That's all any religion is. It's all make believe, and they don't want other people harshing your buzz, man.
Hey, man,
Well,
you're going to get stoned, right?
Yeah. And
To
so
be
the
fair,
best
that
way to do
doesn't-
that, what?
This chapter doesn't really speak about an atheist. It speaks about somebody who blasphemed the name.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody who doesn't believe.
That is
No,
not
no.
the
That's
same.
that's not blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
Not the
Blasphemy
same
is a more
thing.
it's a broader term.
Yes.
It includes
Okay.
anyone who insults God in any
Mhm.
way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
Well,
have a
and
comment on this as
basically,
well.
what it's amounting to is it's addressing anybody who doesn't blindly follow whatever the fuck the clergy says.
For example,
when
if
they
someone
say
says
that's
God
not
damn
true,
it, that would be a thing.
when they say there is no God, when they say you're making up shit, that's blaspheming. When you tell the priest they're making up shit they don't know, that's blaspheming the God, and that will get you killed. That's how we get religion
Blasphemy?
established.
Well,
No,
the thing is, like,
blasphemy,
let's
you.
let's say you have somehow been wronged in life, which I'm sure we have all experienced, and then like if we were believers, we'd go like, God damn you, God, like you piece of shit. That would also
God
be
damn you,
blasphemy.
God.
Yeah,
God damn you, God. Yes.
damn straight.
Curse you,
O-
God, for
other
all
God,
these horrors that
damn
you've given
you,
upon
this
me.
other God.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is it's actually kind of interesting here with the law in verse 15 there. So this kind of it clearly stems from at the very least a henotheistic tradition, but it kind of has the tone of that early Israelite polytheism, because anyone cursing his god or his gods, I'm not sure what's the word that's actually used there for the first instance of God? Should any man vilify his God? Is that
Is it Yahweh or Elohim?
is it Elohim or is it
Where is it? Verse
Mine
15?
says Yahweh, but you
Verse
probably wrote
15.
Elohim.
Elohav. It uses
Yeah,
Elohav.
his God.
No, just a cursory examination. I mean, just looking at the base The blasphemy defined as an act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things. And of course, sacrilege is a violation or misuse of what is regarded as sacred. So you're not being reverent.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you
But
tell somebody, if you tell the priest, you're full of shit, man, that's sacrilege. That's blaspheming the God.
Mhm.
I'd like to
That
point
could
out,
be.
though, that it's, at least in this tradition, and certainly in the Christian tradition, it's also a matter of having incorrect opinions about certain things. Not everything is considered so sacred that it's what Christians would call necessary to salvation. But I mean, rivers of blood have been spilled over whether the Holy Spirit enters you at the moment of confession or at the moment of baptism, whether the transubstantiation is literal or the sacrifice is symbolic, if over whether or not this or that thing counts as blasphemy could get you killed for blasphemy. It's endless. It's killing people who over the pattern of Russell's teapot.
But again,
Does it
you
have
have
the
to
little
you
blue
have to
things on it?
revere whatever the priest says. That's what these laws are about. You believe what I say because I say. Incorrect interpretations or any interpretations I say are incorrect. It's all about authoritarianism.
Well,
Well,
it's very authoritarian.
I mean, it is authoritarian,
Absolutely.
definitely, but I would still say that you're kind of oversimplifying it, though. So it's not. It could certainly
I'm
apply.
simplifying it, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the because like it could certainly apply to a situation like that, and whether or not like at the time, whether or not what they believed was true wouldn't have anything to do with their writing of the law about it. So
No.
like it's not that like just simply anyone who speaks out against like these legislations is blaspheming, but it's like because like when you invoke the name, that being Yahweh, and vilify it or something, so that would be the general charge of blasphemy, and that could cover
Mhm.
both saying that, hey, priest, you're full of shit, but it could also cover like just like in the case of Job, where Job is like super mad at God, right? And so
Right, but he doesn't
so
curse him,
getting
and
to.
there's a big deal made out of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then eventually he gets convinced by Elihu, I think was the guy that came out to him. Was that his name?
Ali who?
I
Or
forget.
what? How, Ali what?
Are we yodeling?
I,
this?
I forget.
Ali?
I think wasn't that the name of the guy that so he has three friends, they didn't really help, and then another
The
guy.
young guy spoke. It might have been Elihu.
Elihu?
I'd have to
don't
Eliyahu.
are we talking about an
Eliyahu.
animated movie?
Sure sounds
No,
like
no.
it right about now.
It's just the Bible, Art. It's okay. It's okay. It's just the Bible. So yeah, I would
It's not a
really-
Pixar film.
Yeah, so they have, as noted already, taken up the idea of lex talionis here, and this is where scholars try to figure out which came from which. Do we have like the idea of it being summarized in Exodus, which I think Van Setters argues, or do we have the idea of it being expanded in chapter 24 here? Because the thing is, there is a clear connection. So Nahan actually notes here, critics have traditionally noted that the legislation in verses 17 through 21 is based on the Talianic law in Exodus 21, 23 through 25, which it expands in various ways, yet it has generally been overlooked that the case described in 24:10 takes up the situation recounted in Exodus 21:22, a quarrel between two men, each time with the same verbal form, the very case introducing the legislation on talion in the Covenant Code. So it's so Nihan thinks this is a case of like biblical expansion, where you have like this first general law and then it was expanded later, or in the case of the covenant code, it could also be a summation, which scholars have argued variously. But either way, the idea of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and in this case, it would be an utterance for an utterance. So this expands it to a religious dimension as well. So like, should any man vilify his God, he shall bear his offense. That's one. And then he who invokes the Lord's name shall be doomed to die. So they have this clear separation in what is a polytheistic worldview, where anyone who vilifies their own God is a sinner, but if you vilify this specific God, then it's a cause for death. So it's probably a henotheistic.
So this halibut is good enough for Jehovah.
Yes.
Jehovah. In fairness,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say we need to remember also that at this point, words were often believed to have magical powers, incantations about God specifically, and that people would take vows, may God strike me dead if I lie, and they actually believed the God would. So it's something to take into account, that that's the kind of mindset you're dealing with, that these words might have inordinate power.
Yeah, that's a worldwide thing too.
Oh, absolutely. But that's why blasphemy comes to be taken so seriously. And then it develops into, how dare you say that Jesus is God? How dare you say he's not? And then everybody murders everybody. But it starts with magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I just
I've
find
encountered an
fascinating
awful lot of people. I've encountered an awful lot of people with biblical names, but I can't remember ever meeting a girl named Shelomith.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, this is probably
Of course you would, Tomer.
I live in Israel. I mean,
Exactly.
it's a common name here.
It's not pronounced like that, but it's.
I feel like
Shlomit.
Tomer Isaac will probably have noted this already, but so Alter notes that Mary Douglas ingeniously detects in these names a kind of allegorical play, compensation daughter of lawsuit from the tribe of judgment. That's the
Well, actually,
What?
Rashi has
Yeah.
another explanation for the name, which I found very funny. But I'll get to that when I'm doing my commentary.
yeah. But it seems to be a hypothetical case where they're very. I'm not sure about the translations of those words, and I'm not sure if it is just or story wise, it would be an allegory, right? So not entirely sure about Divrey, but yeah, I'm hopefully that can be expanded on.
I just like the fact these are all taken from the laws of Hammurabi, and that happened way before this was probably written. So
They were probably quite common.
Oh my god, it's almost like there's an ancient Near Eastern context.
Yep. That's
just wanna
what
say
I
that-
find.
Well, another thing to look at with the Hammurabi reference is that even like Christians, young Earth creationists and such, who get the timelines wrong on everything, they want to push this back much further than it was, but they'll put it at like max 1500 BCE, and Hammurabi was still centuries earlier than that.
Yes, it was.
And I can speak to this as someone raised with that mindset. Then you have to believe that they've also got the dating of Hammurabi wrong and everything else.
It's a big old
Creationism
conspiracy.
creationism doesn't just fuck up your understanding of biology and geology and every form of science. It also fucks up your understanding of history, because you genuinely have to find a way to just ignore or compress all of written history into, at the very max, 10,000 years.
No, not even that, because you got 4,500 years. 4,500 years from Noah, right? So I mean, everything we know of that was happening at that time in the 24th century BC, everything we know that was already going on before that and happening during that, you have to ignore all of it.
Lawrence, real quick, is the Exodus from Babylon before or after Hammurabi? I can't remember.
Way after.
Way
Way after.
Way
Yeah.
after.
Okay.
Oh,
No,
wow.
I can't. I just couldn't think right now because I'm
like
getting my
like
time
almost
dates mixed up.
2,000 years after.
2,000 years. Okay. I want to make sure of that because my brain was starting like
It
that's not
would
right.
be even long before the Egypt Exodus if that had ever happened.
Right.
Yeah. Now, as I understand it, they commonly want to put the Exodus out of Egypt. They want to put that around. Usually, they want to associate that with Ramses, and so they put it at about 1250 BC. This would be 500 years after Hammurabi,
At
and
least.
still, I think, close to 1,000 years before the Exodus from Babylon, because that was around 450.
Was it
Am I right,
1,000?
Lawrence?
Okay, so yeah, well, from Babylon it would have been around that time.
It was under the Persians.
So the when was it? So they stayed in there for like about 70 years ish, right? And the exile happened in like around, what was it? Was it the end of the 6th century? I think.
I
So
used
yeah,
to know this. I
like-
just can't remember right now.
yeah, but I can't exactly even remember when Hammurabi was exactly, but I know that it was much older than
17. I get 1750 to 1800 BCE.
Okay, then yeah, this is about 1,000 years later, a little bit more than 1,000 years later.
For
but-
what?
I would like to
Okay.
point out
Okay.
the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth premise is not necessarily a direct line of Hammurabi, although it very
Right.
well probably can
Oh.
be. But it's a necessary progress in human sociological development and legal development to move from kind of tribal groups taking vengeance for a slight insofar as they see appropriate to legislating a direct blow for blow, because you know you can get a kind of a Hatfield and McCoy situation where a small injury is repaid with a larger injury, which is repaid with a murder, which is repaid with killing a family, which is repaid with, and back and forth it goes forever. So it's a necessary step in civilization to move to a more just system of tit for tat, as opposed to just vengeful.
I always took Hammurabi's laws just to kind of rationalize the things that have already been around for a long time, because we can see things that were spoken about in the old Assyrian text about the different types of laws for different types of actions taken. They had things like that even in Egypt. So Hammurabi just kind of put specific things in place. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth is where we get that directly, but all those other things are still applying.
Mm-hmm.
So
But you can see in different nations, similar things in medicine. You go from everything being spirits, it's the demons. We have to, get the demons out of you for illness, as opposed to going to something more physical, like your four humors, which was a terrible idea, but it was a necessary step in progression to get to physician from I wave a dead chicken over you and sprinkle you with blood, and the bad spirits will run away because icky.
I'm going to read a couple
just-
of comments. Rachel Light says, "This sounds like God is allowing people to worship more than the one God, or am I missing something here?"
Well, not necessarily allowing, I would say, but it assumes that there is worship of more than one God, which is already known because this is meant to apply to both foreigners and natives, right? So the thing is, they would still say that should any man vilify his God, he shall bear his offense. He shall bear his offense, right? So there is still a sin involved, but it's not nearly as much of a great sin as blaspheming Yahweh.
And I could
Right,
see
yeah.
that kind of being well, let their God curse them since they insulted him, and kind of a let their God deal with his own business kind of an attitude.
We
And
can't
then
hurt
Kicker
God's
White
feces
Lion.
after all.
Kicker White Lion says, "Stop it. Now look, no one is to stone anyone until I blow this whistle. You understand? Even, and I want to make this absolutely clear, even if they do say Jehovah."
Yeah. By the way, the Jewish tradition for this whole section is that the blaspheming is saying the name, which Jehovah is kind of based on that idea, on that name.
Whoop,
but
he
it's-
said
it's
Jehovah.
probably- Yeah. So,
Oh,
so like,
Stairs!
Yeah, so Jews don't even say, so they never say the Tetragrammaton, and when they read the Bible or say prayers and stuff, they always replace it with Adonai, which means Lord, but they won't in when they're talking casually, they won't even use the word Adonai. They'll say the name Hashem.
Hashem,
they're very
or Hakadosh
very
Baruch
careful
Hu,
not
or
to.
various types of names.
Yeah, they're
And
very
I actually have a
careful not
comment
to take.
about this from Galun.
Ah, yeah,
comment
good.
to verse 15.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
And then
You wanna
Salion
start?
D says, I have another argument against the Exodus. If slaves in Egypt, they would have had better understanding of medicine and then better laws.
Well, those things don't necessarily go together. Better understanding
Yeah.
of medicine and then better laws, but they would have certainly had a better understanding of medicine. So, because like we talked about it last time, I think, right, where the Egyptians were pretty good for their time, and in terms
Yeah,
of
for
medicine.
their time.
Yeah.
They even had a form of antibiotic that gave them stronger bones and whatnot that they found out in the food that they ate.
And
And
the
then
use of
Pandora's
honey was very very smart too. Again, it's no modern
And then
medicine, but it's
Pandora's
also not
Pinata,
bird blood.
which I love that name, says, isn't eye for an eye a post factum version of do unto others?
Do unto others as they have done unto you. Well, I suppose it's better than do unto others before they do unto you.
Yep.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. First on verses 2 and 3. This section is very similar to Exodus 27, verses 20 to 21, only here the pure lampstand is mentioned. And Rashi comments, the section in you shall further instruct in Exodus 27:20 was mentioned there only for the sake of the order of the work of the tabernacle, to explain the purpose of the lampstand, and so it implies you, i.e. Moses, will, in the end, command the sons of Israel regarding this. Verses 5 to 9, Bamberger comments, from remote antiquity, one form of offering was to set for food before the image of God, later to remove it for consumption by king or priest. Babylonian ritual also called for an offering of 12 loaves, but sometimes large and smaller numbers were offered, as seen in A-Net pages 335a and 343c. That the custom was ancient in Israel is attested by the story in 1 Samuel 21. When David fled from Saul, he came to the shrine at Nob and asked for bread. The local priest had nothing but bread of display, which he gave to David when the latter assured him that he and his followers were in a state of ritual purity. This instance from early Israelite history shows that the priestly writings, whatever the date when they were finally edited, contain very old elements.
And this could, if it was given to him, I mean, you could see that as seeing him as a king. Because priests or kings could potentially, I mean, obviously here it says priests, but I can see that as a little too much credit for Saul's comfort.
And now on verse 10, first on the Egyptian father. So according to Leviticus Rabbah 32:4 and Targums Suda Jonathan, this was the Egyptian who Moses killed. And Milgrom writes, quote, the fact the blasphemer's father is not mentioned in verse 11 means that the father remained in Egypt, or that he had joined the Erev Rav, mixed multitude, or that one who has the audacity to curse the name of God is not worthy of having his own name articulated in the Torah, end quote. He further notes that even though the rabbis in the Talmud Yevamot 45a decreed that an offspring of an Israelite woman is an Israelite, the son of the Israelite woman here could not be counted among those who would inherit the land, since that right is patrilineal, as seen in Numbers 2:2 and 26:35. In fact, Midrash Pitron Torah, dated from around 9th or 11th century CE, emphasizes this point by giving him an Egyptian-sounding name, Chapishtuk.
There's also a tradition that the fight was broke out because he had pitched his tent among his
I have a
mother's
comment on
tribe.
this as well. Yeah, I have a comment on this as well. Yeah.
So, Tomer, if you blaspheme Yahweh, you can't be mentioned in the Torah. That explains why Peter is only mentioned in the New Testament.
I sorry, I don't know the New Testament. Went out. So Ibn Ezra and the Maimonides comment that he went out from his tent, since the term Vayitze Vayetze implies the object, as seen in Numbers 16:27. Rashi, based on Leviticus Rabbah 32:3, gives three explanations. Quote, 1. Rabbi Levi says he went out of his everlasting world. 2. Rabbi Berachia says from the section above he set out to ridicule. He mocked the showbread, saying, on every Sabbath he shall arrange them. It is the custom of a king to eat fresh bread every day. Is it then his way to eat a cold loaf 9 days old? 3. A teaching states he went out guilty from Moses' court. He had come to pitch his tent amid the tribe of Dan. They asked him, what right have you to be here? He said to them, I am of the descendants of Dan. They said to him, each man shall camp by his own flag that bears the signs of their father's house. It is written, he entered Moses' court and went out guilty, whereupon he stood up and blasphemed.
So the court case went against him, and thus he blasphemed, and thus he was.
I mean, it says
That's
he had a fight with a certain Israelite.
Yeah,
Also is
actually,
named.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Milgrom notes that this is in the definite article. I mean, Ish Ha-Israeli, which indicates that it's a certain person and a well-known person. About verse 11, the blaspheme the name with a curse. The word that is translated to blaspheme is vayikov, which is derived from the root nun kaf bet, to pierce, and by extension to specify or pronounce explicitly, as Levine notes. We find the same root in verse 16. Septuagint and Targum Onkelos also render pronounce or designate. The word that is translated to curse is vayikalel, and he cursed. While the verse doesn't say whether he blasphemed his opponent or God, Milgrom notes that in biblical jurisprudence, God himself is being cursed, as seen in Exodus 22:27 and 1 Kings 21:10. Whereas cursing an enemy with Yahweh's name is normative, as seen in Joshua 6:26 and 2 Samuel 16:8. Milgrom also writes, why was cursing God such a heinous offense? David Noel Friedman, I believe, is on the right track. Quote, how is it possible, first of all, to bless God when he himself is the source of all blessing? Perhaps it is a hangover from primitive views that indeed human beings could confer blessings on God, just as he could confer them to human beings. It betokens a certain reciprocity corresponding to the sacrificial system, which somewhere in its roots had the idea of providing the god with nourishment, end quote. Conversely, a curse was believed to be so powerful that it was conceived to be efficacious against a deity, end quote.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's probably like one of the origins for religions in general, is you kind of, one of the origins for sacrifice within religious traditions. So you're kind of giving something of yours to the god, and it is pleasing to them. We kind of saw that earlier, but like that is an idea that expands or that permeates religious traditions everywhere. So
yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a question of whether you're actually sustaining the god or currying favor. There have definitely been many traditions of gods essentially feeding off the worship of their people. The Lord inhabits the praises of his people. It's the worship, the actual belief and feelings of sanctity and how that's expressed in ritual that is the thing that sustains the god, not necessarily the meat and bread in the same way that it would sustain us. But again, that's kind of one of those ideas that is not always very clearly defined and might be held at a higher level in that time than your average person on the street, who I don't know how they felt about it.
Now about Shelomith, the daughter of Divrey the Danite. So Rashi interprets the names as follows. Shelomith, she was called this because she would chatter. Be well, shalom alach, shalom aleichem, babbling many words, asking about everyone's health. Daughter of Divrey, she was a chatterer, dabranit, speaking with every person who came her way, and therefore she became corrupted.
Isn't it explicit
She
that
wouldn't
she
shut
spoke
up,
to
is what
men?
you're trying to say? Oh my
Doesn't he say
God.
that she spoke to men? Isn't that what he says?
I don't think so. Did he?
Well, so she was that
Uh,
aunt who worries over everyone and tries to feed you up. Are you okay? Are you sick? Are you cold? Are you hot?
he says Adam in Kol Adam, but
Jewish mom indeed.
but
Yeah,
but I see another one of his. It is sorry, the mentioning of of the woman. It is to the credit of Israel that this verse publicized this one, i.e., the mother, to say that she alone was a wayward woman, but it is basically a prostitute.
yeah, harlot.
Yeah, harlot. I love Rashi. However, Levine notes that the genealogy of the blasphemer is significant. His mother came from the tribe of Dan, associated with the northern cult of the Temple of Dan, which the Jerusalemite priesthood considered illegitimate. Milgrom writes that the mention of Dan was intended as a slur against the tribe, and as recognized by the Sifra, the names given are signs of disgrace. Quote, a disgrace for him, i.e. the blasphemer, a disgrace for his mother, a disgrace for his family, and a disgrace for his tribe. End quote.
Yeah, there's also, if we recall, when we were talking about the golden calf narrative, Jeroboam in Kings sets up, two golden calves, one at Bethel and one at Dan. But
Dan and Beersheba, yeah. Or
and
Bethel, yeah.
But the inclusion there of Dan is probably a later addition, is the thing. So that would, if that's the case, then this being a polemical, this being like a polemical note against Dan would make a lot of sense.
It does. It's interesting. It's very interesting because I've pointed out, and we both pointed out, there was the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. The Northern Kingdom primarily worshiping El, and the Southern Kingdom Yahweh. The cult of Yahweh is what went out in the Lower Kingdom, and we'll talk about when we get to Deuteronomy and Josiah and all that jazz. But in after Babylon, when you're coming back and this is all being put together, however much of it was written down in Babylon, I don't know. There's this retcon of we were all one people and we were always worshiping the same God, but there's also lots of little cuts and snide little, like this one, like the, speaking against the cult of Dan and the, the high places and the calves and it's, sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's less, but there's lots of little snide bits like that in there, trying to sort of
Little digs here and there.
Yeah, digs here and there. You're denigrating this thing, but you're also trying to say it was never really different. It was always the same. So that it's very, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, basically.
Now on verse 12, they put him in custody. Hebrew Bible uses the definite article bamishmar, which implies a specific place, as Ibn Ezra notes. Milgrom writes that incarceration was a rare form of punishment in the ancient Near East and existed for debtors and slaves on the estates of kings and landowners. He, as well as Levine and Galil, writes that the word mishmar connotes a temporary holding place until God would render judgment on the transgressor.
You got to admit it's pretty hard because, within the myth, they're still sitting in tents in the desert. So it's kind of hard to build a jail.
Now lay their hands on his head. Various explanations have been given to this act. Rashi comments that the people with this act said to him, your blood is in your head, and we are not punished for your death, for you caused it to yourself. Ibn Ezra writes that the hand laying symbolized their testimony. The whole show comments that this was done in order that the witnesses will be forgiven for having heard the curse. Milgrom and Levine note that laying the hand had a transference function, as seen in Leviticus 1:4, either of authority or of the pollution caused by the blasphemy.
Wait, pollution caused by blasphemy?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yes.
Cooties.
Well, in the sense
Yeah.
of
Is that the
spiritual
smoke from
impurity
burning
probably.
all the people at the stake?
It's not that kind of pollution.
Man.
No, that's my air right now.
yeah.
Verse 15.
Yeah, because you live in flaming Canada.
Yeah, I live in flaming Canada, not that far from several very large fires in BC. So, we don't go outside these days, and masks are not for COVID anymore.
Okay.
Verse 15, Galil comments, the writing here does not mention the punishment. Some interpret that a person will not die unless they explicitly mention God's special name, quote unquote, as seen in the Talmud Sanhedrin 56a. And Rabbi Meir there interpret that the special name is the Tetragrammaton. Therefore, if he did not mention the explicit name, he is not required to be killed. However, based on the plain reading, this interpretation is unlikely. Rather, the intention here is to determine the punishment of the blasphemer by stoning, as explained in verse 14, and is proven by is proven a fortiori by verse 16. If he pronounces the name Yahweh falsely, as explained in Exodus 26, his punishment is death. A fortiori, he who proclaims the name of the Lord and curses it like the act of the blasphemer.
Rashi mentions there is a thing in Jewish law about all of these death penalties are only applicable when like two witnesses view the act and warn the person, saying this sin is punishable by the death penalty, and then they still do it, and then they're brought to court, and they have to have a court of 100. Or how many? I don't remember how many. They need like a very big court of judges for the death penalty. So Rashi says like excision for the one who is not warned.
Okay, so if they're not
rather
warned,
than stoning.
okay, well, I suppose that would be to protect foreign traders too, because they.
Well, another thing is again like Jewish tradition. It seems to be that all these places where it says stranger, they more kind of see it as meaning converts.
Okay.
And this whole story is about treating converts and native-born Israelites as the same when it comes to legal proceedings. So,
but the convert might not necessarily remember all the things that are punishable by death, because there's a lot of them, and some of them are very silly. So they get a warning.
I just
no,
it's so
they're
interesting
treated
whenever
the
I think
same.
about it. It's
I've seen
those.
the comments.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. I've said it before. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I've seen the comments. There are
comments.
some comments that that aren't haven't read. So I'll look
Okay,
at
so Torbjorn Lindberg offers 50 Swedish kroner and says, I had a question, but I forgot it. So this is for the Support Your Mathematicians Fund.
that. Thanks, I guess.
Go
And
math.
then Nee offers $5 and says, the only Newer Testament Tomer recognizes is written in Reformed Egyptian. By the way, it's currently 74 degrees Fahrenheit in sunny Akron, Ohio.
Similar here in London.
Don't start.
And then Nee offers again $2 and says, gold calves, but my job gave me calves of steel.
He says, I don't know gold calves.
Yeah, I don't know gold calves. Yeah. And then
Hey,
Minute
guys,
Rice
save
offers
lives.
$6. Minute Rice offers $6.66 and says, don't really have anything to say about the reading, so I'll just say Hail Satan. All right, thank you very much for that.
Verse 18, life for life. This term, placed after the condition of killing a beast, is the same term that appears in Exodus 21:23. As Milgrom notes, Leviticus 24 removes this formula from the Talion law in verse 20 and places it with the case of the animal, thereby saying that compensation for death applies only to animals. Moreover, this phrase is missing in the repetition of the verse in verse 21. Ibn Ezra writes that the formula applies to both verse 17 and verse 18. Milgrom, however, writes that the previous word, yeshalemena, must make restitution, remains unresolved. Levine writes that the restitution is by one animal for the other. Milgrom, however, writes that it can be shown that the legal term shilem always means monetary payment. He, alongside Galil, proposed that this formula shouldn't be in verse 18, but at the end of verse 17. Milgrom conjectures that a subsequent age trident, fully aware of the judicial practices in the land, deliberately would have broken the nexus between nefesh and mum, which is injuries in verse 19, in the Talion formula, lest the impression be given that the latter, like the former, prescribes literal Talion. And Peter, can you please show the picture?
Oh, that's thick.
Yeah, so this is from Galil's the book that Galil's comment is. So you have the first stage, stage A, which is he renders the hypothetical original text, and the term nefesh tachad nefesh, life for life, is the one that I've marked. And then in stage B, somebody copied it like in the middle. He proposes that it's basically a scribal or a copyist error. And then stage C, you see, this is verse 18 at the bottom, and that's where we get the what we have now.
I mean, does the current text actually have that big space?
I don't know, but this is what he proposed. That's what he proposed for the.
It does actually make more sense when you remember that it's written written right to left as opposed to left to right. So like if you if you write out sentences, they're not all of a length. I mean, but he's proposing basically that this migrated over revisions, which I am not a scribe. I couldn't tell you how probable that is, but I mean, there have been some amusing scribal errors.
Yeah, so with the Hebrew Bible, it's very much, they're all kind of written the same, like the same font as you can see here, pretty much. And the number of letters per line is more or less the same. So it's like, if you look at the same, at multiple scrolls, you'll see that like this verse is always written with, let's see, the beginning of the verse is on the first line, the end, and then the second line begins with every soul, a man should, anyone who kills, any soul of a man shall be killed, and then the highlighted bit is life for life or soul for soul, and then the migration is kind of like just had to move down a little bit because that second line is the same length as the end of the verse, which is the end of the hypothetical version, where it just says, and anyone who kills a animal should pay for it. And so they do line up. And if there is a space like that between the killing a man and killing an animal in the actual Masoretic text, because they do have those spaces, if there actually is a space in the middle of the verse like that, then that does kind of make sense. Like that is a random place to have space like that.
Yeah, I suppose it's perhaps there was intended to be a bit of judicial leeway, because depending on the circumstances, particularly with regard to the animal, whether you would pay with an animal of equivalent value or with money, things like that, there could have been a certain amount of.
Peter, you can move the picture.
Yeah. I think the traditional Jewish interpretation is like that. Yeah, that this is kind of for both the two parts of the verse end with life for life, and it's kind of teaching that that you don't have to, a person is killed for killing another person, but if someone kills an animal, you don't have to replace that animal with the exact same. Like if someone kills a sheep of a certain age and value, you don't have to replace it with another sheep of the same value. You can just give them money for it. Same with the whole eye for an eye for anything. They kind of very early on it was understood to be monetary compensation of the value of the injury, not the person who gives the injury gets the same injury.
Yeah,
which
actually,
was the original, but.
Actually, in verse 19, in the same manner, KJV and JPS read, "As he hath done, so shall it be done to him." And Bamberger comments, "There is strong evidence to believe that the biblical law did not envision literal physical retaliation, but rather the payment of money damages. Yet the language of this verse certainly seems to refer to the infliction on the guilty party of the injury committed. According to the literal reading, this law sets a maximum penalty while equating rich and poor. There is no record of a single instance where a rabbinic court carried out physical retaliation, and Jewish tradition all but unanimously understood the language as referring to financial compensation." And finally, on verse 21, this verse seems to be a summary of verses 17 to 18 and doesn't seem to add that much. Rashi, based on the Talmud Sanhedrin 84b, writes that verse 21 deals with the case of injury, not death, since the word nefesh does not appear here, in contrast with verses 17 to 18. Ibn Ezra suggests that its purpose is to mention the stranger, and so must be read with verse 22. Milgrom and Galil propose that this verse has a stylistic purpose, to complete the circular structure of the section and to provide the seventh law of it to artfully perfect its structure, because 7 is a perfect number.
Of course, magic numbers. Can't forget
that's
that.
it. that's it for my commentary on this chapter.
All right, are we ready to move on to the Sabbath year?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a fairly long chapter. It's
It
li-
is.
55 verses. I
Break it up.
volunteer to read this.
Should we break it up and commentate on?
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
let you read it.
Section at
I
a
was
time?
going to read it, but okay.
How should we break it up? Like 30.
Let me read through 7.
Okay.
The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, and the hired worker and temporary resident who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten." All right, so Mary, you may take it over.
Yeah, I can actually comment on this part at least.
Okay.
First on verse 4, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest. Levine writes that allowing the land to lie fallow every 7th year helped to reduce the amount of sodium in the soil, especially where irrigation was employed. Milgrom writes that the periodic fallowness of agricultural land is indispensable to its continued fertility, an observation that early farmers would have realized, as seen in Philo Special Laws 2, sections 97 to 98. He further notes, quote, "There was an economic advantage to accumulate a surplus during the first 6 years to be consumed in the 7th and thereby obviate the need to engage in a money economy. As demonstrated by M. Hildenbrand and David C. Hopkins, leaving the entire land fallow for the 7th year, provided there had been judicious rotation during the previous 6, need not have resulted in economic stress."
So Nahan actually has a pretty decent note about this. So once again, there's the big disagreement between him and Van Setters, I will say, about which one came first. I mean, that's a good reason I like Van Setters. He's always like he's always been an underdog, and honestly, his arguments make a lot of sense. But anyways, this is clearly connected to Exodus 23, 10 through 11. And that's been noted by many scholars. The 7th year of Exodus, this is from Nihan, the 7th year of Exodus 23 is reinterpreted from H's distinct perspective. While the connection between the 7th year and the 7th day as a day of rest was already made in the covenant code, the 7th year is now interpreted as a sabbatical year for the land, on the model of the transformation of the 7th day of rest into the fixed weekly Sabbath after the exile. Moreover, the transformation of the 7th year into a sabbatical year in Leviticus 25 emphasizes its religious function and significance. Like the 7th day, it is not only a Sabbath for the land, but first and foremost, a Sabbath for Yahweh.
Because
needs
he
a
is a
break.
special boy.
I'm a little confused about what this verse says. It says, don't harvest, don't prune, don't collect anything, but you can eat any food that it grows on its own. In fact, you're supposed to feed yourself, your servants, your workers, temporary residents, your livestock, and even wild animals on your land, but don't harvest anything. How's that supposed to work?
You noticed that too, did you?
Yeah.
I feel like it's like, because seeds would have fallen in the previous years, you can sort of harvest or glean whatever sprouts of its own accord, but you can't sort of go through the planting and sowing and whatnot.
It doesn't just say like harvest anything. It says like specifically like don't reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines.
Hold on.
So not
That
sure
reminds
exactly
me
what
of
that
something.
means.
Where was it? Was it in
can't gather
chapter
the grapes of your own
22?
fruit. That's a
I remember that I actually was translating Tomer. When you asked me to do something for the Septuagint, I remember translating this verse. Do you remember what verse that was?
That was in 27 or no 25. Yeah, 25:5. 25:5.
Oh, it was here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It could just mean like do not
Yeah,
harvest it for like for your own benefit. It should be like
yeah.
free for all.
Yeah, I have a comment on the grapes of your untended vines, which that's why I asked you. I'll just say it real quick. In Hebrew, it's envei nizirecha. The term only appears here in the Bible. The word nizirecha is derived from the root nun zain resh, withhold or abstain. As such, Targum Onkelos, Rashi, and Bechol Shor render it untended vines. Levine notes that number 6 verses 3 to 4 commands the Nazarite, in Hebrew Nazir, to not partake of anything that grows on the vine, and perhaps grapes that grew naturally during the sabbatical year were called Nazarite grapes in ancient Israel. Septuagint renders grapes of your consecration, or something that made you holy. The translations, there was a difference between Milgrom's translation and this Net's translation.
Well, that is what a consecration is. It would be something that would make you holy.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why I asked you. Since the Nazarite is consecrated to God in number 6:6, Nachmanides renders untrimmed grapes, i.e., grapes allowed to grow wild, as the Nazarite's hair in number 6:5.
There is this idea, I guess, from Jewish law about you can kind of declare your own property to be what's called hefker, which means like I don't know how you would translate it in English, but it means free, as in you kind of renounce ownership over it, and it's legally binding. If you declared something to be hefker, it is hefker. So like when we like we were kids in school, we would like say hefker, and then someone would be like, I want it, but like you jump in first and say no, I undo it or whatever.
We call that dibs here in the States.
Yes.
It's like
but it's
reverse dibs. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's a free for all, so I can take it
like
too.
hefker law.
Mhm.
You say,
Anti-dibs.
who say like
Anti-dibs.
free for all, nope. And so if someone like claimed it before you reclaimed it back for yourself, then you actually had to give it to them. But it's like some stupid kids thing.
I've got a comment from Alien X Gaming, offers $20. Thank you very much, and says, Aaron, thank you for all the work you do. You have been an inspiration to myself and to many of my friends that I have shown your work to. Thank you to the panel as well. You're welcome, and thank you for sharing that.
It's awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start reading. I'll read from up to 38. You shall
Okay.
count off
Wait,
7
we haven't
weeks-
even started. We only read the
What?
first 7 verses.
We did.
Oh, you were
Aaron
reading
read
up
them.
to 38.
Yeah, up to 38.
Yeah,
Okay,
as
so
you go to the
keep
program.
starting
8 to
from there.
38.
Yeah.
You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud in the 7th month on the 10th day of the month, the day of atonement. You shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his holding, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines. For it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. When you sell property to your neighbor, or buy any from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the jubilee. And in selling to you, he shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. The more such years, the higher the price you pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price. For what he is selling you is a number of harvests. Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I, the Lord, am your God. You shall observe my laws and faithfully keep my rules, that you may live upon the land in security. The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. And should you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year, if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? That's your answer, Ember. I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will still be eating old grain of that crop. You will be eating the old until the 9th year, until its crops come in. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers resident with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land. If your kinsman is in straits and has to sell part of his holding, his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his kinsman has sold. If a man has no one to redeem for him, but prospers and requires enough to redeem with, he shall compute the years since its sale, refund the difference to the man to whom he sold it, and return to his holding. If he lacks sufficient means to recover it, what he sold shall remain with the purchaser until the Jubilee. In the Jubilee year it shall be released, and he shall return to his holding. If a man sells a dwelling house in a walled city, it may be redeemed until a year has elapsed since its sale. The redemption period shall be a year. If it is not redeemed before a full year has elapsed, the house in the walled city shall pass to the purchaser beyond reclaim throughout the ages. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. But houses in villages that have no encircling walls shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released through the Jubilee. As for the cities of the Levites, the houses in the cities they hold, the Levites shall forever have the right of redemption. Such property as may be redeemed from the Levites, houses sold in a city they hold, shall be released through the Jubilee, for the houses in the cities of the Levites and their holding among the Israelites. But the unenclosed land about their cities cannot be sold, for that is the holding for all time. If your kinsman, being in straits, come under your authority, and you hold him as though a resident alien, let him live by your side. Do not exact from him advance or accrued interest, but fear your God. Let him live by your side as your kinsman. Do not lend him your money at advanced interest, or give him your food at accrued interest. I am the Lord, I the Lord am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God.
So this this idea of a jubilee year, so you may have seen it referred to in other ways, like especially when we get to was it in Daniel, one of the later prophets, a phrase that's used is 7 weeks of years. So if you have like 7 years making up the first week, and then 7 weeks, it'd be 49. So it'd be 49 years, and that would be their grand cycle, I guess.
Mhm.
It actually kind of reminded me of how the Mayans had their cycle, their calendrical
Mm.
system. So I actually did a video on this years ago. It was on the Dresden Codex. So essentially, the way that their calendar worked, it had cycles of 52 years. So it would kind of like rotate over to the next big cycle, and that's actually what 2012 was supposed to be. That was their next big. That was the start of their next cycle. It wasn't the end of the world. It was just like
Yeah,
their
it,
next
it was
cycle.
the end of a section of calendar.
Right. Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So like I'm not sure if in Jewish tradition when you turn 49 it's something special, but at least in the Mayans, if you turn 52, it was something special.
Yes, it was.
I think
Yes.
it's the 50th year is the year. It's 49 years of cycles, and then the 50th year is the
I see.
Jubilee year.
It's interesting,
Maybe the
just
49th
going back
year, right?
momentarily to the Sabbath year concept. We were talking about, how do you eat? And it says there'll be a great production in the 6th year, so that you'll be able to eat during that year. You'll be able to harvest enough for 2 years. You can see where the myth of the manna came from, the manna from heaven, that every day you're given just enough for that day until the day before the Sabbath, and then you're given a double portion, and
Yep.
it doesn't go bad, even though it normally goes bad instantly. But it doesn't go bad if you're saving it over the Sabbath. So that idea that the blessings
The
of
double
God
portion.
would double portion when you needed it, so that you could give the Sabbath year and have that break. And I mean, yeah, it's you can see where the myth comes in. It's giving people
Yeah,
an
there's definitely a
assurance,
connection.
making that connection.
Yeah, actually, the English word, the Jubilee, is actually comes from the Hebrew word
Yes,
Yovel, which means
Yovel.
a ram's horn. So it talks
Yes.
about that they'll proclaim, they'll blow a horn. So that would be why it's called that. So it's interesting that this is supposed to be the first description of this system, and yet it is called by name something that is derived from like an action that is done on it. It's like you wouldn't really give it a name like that until you've done it a few times, really, and people were like, oh yeah, the year of the ram's horn. It's a bit interesting to like claim a new system and just call it by such a random name like that.
Yeah.
Certainly
I'll
not the
start my
only thing.
I'll start my commentary here. Verse 8, 7 times 7 years. Milgrom comments, this parenthetical clause is required lest one think that the sabbatical years are consecutive, as the Sifa notes. Perhaps it also evidences that in contrast to general amnesties in the ancient Near East, which occurred irregularly according to the decision of the ruler, in Israel the Jubilee was fixed, a divinely ordained institution that was independent of any human sovereign.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, it seems that this system is kind of similar to what we call freehold and leasehold. So if you sell your property, freehold, it means you're actually selling it, but leasehold kind of means that you're kind of renting it out for a long time. So it seems that the system is a similar idea. You don't really have rights to the land because God gave it to you, so you can't sell it in forever. So you can only do leasehold, and the lease is always fixed to the next Jubilee. So when you sell something, you calculate when is the next Jubilee, and then that's how much the property cost, like how many years they're going to get out of it.
Yeah, it's we have, I mean, similar things with the band here. We still call it the Indian band, even though that's really not appropriate. But on the res, they've basically, there's been some development for building, and they've done like 100-year lease of the land for this area so that you can build houses on it, people can live in them, but that you have to renew the lease. So they're not giving up property rights to the land. But, most people are fine living in a house for 100 years. It's,
Yeah,
so
well, you get like
that kind of
900-year leaseholds in the UK, I think.
I'm sure you do.
Now, verse 10, proclaim liberty. In Hebrew, it's vekaratem dror. KJV also reads proclaim liberty, but more accurate will be proclaim release, as JPS renders. And Levine explains, Hebrew dror is cognate with Akkadian anduraru, which designates an edict of release issued by the old Babylonian kings and some of their successors. This edict was often issued by a king upon ascending the throne and was a feature of a more extensive legal institution known as mesharum, a moratorium declared on debts and indenture. The Akkadian verb dararu, like the Hebrew daled resh resh, means to move about freely, referring in this instance to the freedom granted those bound by servitude. In Jeremiah 34:15, we read that as the Chaldeans approached Jerusalem, King Zedekiah ordered the people to release their indentured servants to proclaim a dror release. In Isaiah 61:1, the Judeans exiled in Babylonia are to be freed under terms of a dror as they are restored to the land. The biblical laws of the Jubilee year thus incorporate Near Eastern legal institutions of great antiquity. End quote. Verse 14, any of your own people. In Hebrew, it's la'amitecha, and KJV renders unto thy neighbor. Milgrom and Levine note that amit refers to a fellow Israelite, as noticed in Leviticus 18:20 and 19:17, and would not be used to designate a non-Israelite. Levine adds that this law only applies to transfers of property among Israelites. Verse 17, Levine comments, this repeats, for emphasis, the statement of verse 14. It is characteristic of the Holiness Code to exhort the Israelite people to act out of fear of God, especially in matters that do not lend themselves easily to enforcement. Only those who realize that God sees all and will punish even secret transgressions of his laws will resist the temptation to try to get away with their sins and their crimes. Verse 23, permanently. KJV, Vulgate, and Peshitta render forever, and the Targums in perpetuity. But more accurate, however, is to read it beyond reclaim, as Milgrom and Levine render, based on the Akkadian contracts discovered at Ugarit. Levine explains, in these documents, the descriptive term tsamit means finally handed over. This term establishes that the sale recorded is final and that the property sold is irretrievable. A clause will often read tsamit adi dariti, finally handed over to all generations. The sale is permanent because it is final and concluded at the full price. This clause corresponds to the formula appearing in verse 30 of our chapter. That formula deals with sales of urban dwellings that become final if not redeemed within 1 year. Letzmitut lakone oto ledorotav, literally, finally handed over to the one who purchases it to his generation. One verse states that sales of achuzah land are not of that status. They are not letzmitut.
It really brings home to me, at least, the slave's mindset. The land does not belong to you. You cannot sell it. You can sell a number of years of its use, but not it.
Yeah, I think it's like
Yeah.
the landowner shouldn't sell the land out of his tribal inheritance sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's rules about that too. But
Verse 25, the relative. In Hebrew, it's go'alo, derived from go'el. The verb redeem reads ga'al, and so go'el means the closest relative able to redeem the land. And Bamberger comments, the close relative had the moral obligation to buy back the family holding. Compare, for example, Ruth 3:12 to 4:6. Originally, the person was also obligated to avenge the murder of a member of the family, and in that situation was called go'el of the blood, i.e., blood avenger, in Deuteronomy 19:6. Similarly, God is called the go'el of Israel, Isaiah 44:6. Verse 29, anyone who sells a house in a walled city. Levine comments, the law of redemption is limited in the case of urban dwellings. A town defined as an area surrounded by a wall is excluded from the tenure system applicable to agricultural land held as an achuzah. In the ancient Near East, towns and cities had a special status as regards tax exemptions and legal prerogatives. In agrarian societies, arable land and, to a degree, pasture land as well were the mainstay of the economy. They accounted for most of the employment in addition to their value as the source of food. In the towns lived the artisans, and those we will today call members of the service professions, which often included members of priestly families. And finally, verse 36, interest or any profit. In Hebrew, it's neshech vetarbit. And Bamberger comments, the usual word for interest is neshech, from the root to bite, apparently meaning the bite taken in advance from the total sum, as notes are commonly discounted today. Accrued interest is the JPS rendering of tarbit, and marbit in verse 37, increase. It is the additional sum to be added to the principal at the time of payment. Earlier translations, like the KJV, employed the word usury, which was formerly synonymous with interest and only later came to mean exorbitant interest. The Torah forbids taking interest in any amount from a fellow Israelite, according to Deuteronomy 23:21. And
Yeah,
that's it for...
Watch The
Sorry.
Merchant of Venice from Shakespeare.
I do think it's kind of ironic how the ban on lending at usury to fellow Jews is honestly kind of what led the Jewish people into banking in one sense,
Yeah.
because they could lend at interest to the rest of us schmucks. And, that and, racism.
Yeah, under Jewish law, they can lend interest to others, but the thing is, it was more to do with the legal, like the secular law
Mhm.
was based on for Christians banned Christians from lending to other Christians interest, because the Bible says this,
Yeah.
which is the Israelites, but their secular law was like, well, no, Jews can lend interest to non-Jews.
Right.
Like I said, exactly what I've just said also is that this is why you want to watch or review the play by Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. It talks
Mhm.
exactly about this practice.
It does, and it's just ironic that both people applying the you can't use interest with your fellow insert, your fellows,
Yeah, so-
the in-group, led to Jewish people being associated with banking for so many years. That and the anti-Semitism that, we can't take goods
Also, they were
from
banned
Jews.
from.
They were banned from selling all kinds of
working.
things. They were banned from all kinds of shit. The only
Yeah,
thing
you couldn't
they
really do
were-
agriculture if you didn't own you weren't allowed to own land. So
Yeah, and if people, you were either banned from selling trade goods or your own goods that you made or what have you.
Done-
What
there was
else are you
some
going to trade it? Everyone will take money.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read on from here. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children are to be released, and they will go back to their own clans and to the property of their ancestors, because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. They must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves, because I fully permit slavery. That's not even a moral issue. It's just not for Jewish people. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. And here God makes clear that slavery is ruthless. So for all those Christians who say, well, the slavery in the Bible wasn't the same thing as American slavery in the Civil War because it was like indentured service. No, fuck that. It says it was ruthless and prohibited for Jews, but allowed for anybody else, because God has no moral judgment against these things. He doesn't know what morality is. Then verse 47. If a
I have
foreigner
to-
residing among you, yes?
Sorry. I was going to say everyone should stick a note in this particular verse, because if you talk to a Christian about slavery, they will always go back to the 6-year thing, which only applied to Jews, male Jews, and not to wives and children that they acquired during their slavery. I have genuinely heard someone, I have had a conversation on Twitter where someone was insisting that this verse about the foreign slaves, the not Jews, that you can give them to your children and make them slaves for life and part of the inheritance and they're fully property, that this wasn't what it said and should be taken in the light of the 6-year thing with for adult male Jews, and that all slaves were treated like that. And they've genuinely insisted that. And I'm like, it says make them slaves for life, give them to your children. Like, no.
Yeah, my question was going to touch on that too, because this does semi-conflict with the rules from Exodus. Like, it does spell out that the Israeli slaves or servants are treated separately, but it refers to the year of Jubilee for them, whereas Exodus is a 6-year thing. So is this like an update to Exodus, or what does the tradition say about these conflicts?
Isaac, Tomer?
Yeah.
So, I would think that because, this would be a specific Jubilee year, right? And just 6 years in Exodus. Now, you can make the argument that, after the 6th year, in which case it could potentially line up with the Jubilee year, but this does seem more stringent, I guess. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Possibly. I could see that the contracts for Jewish indentured servitude might be a week of years, 6 years, and then the Sabbath thing, but that regardless of what the length of your contract was, Jubilee is just a free for all debts are wiped, kaput, regardless, which would certainly, I assume, be reflected in the amount of money you received. That just every time there's a Jubilee year, just everything goes. That's the only way that I can see to sort of harmonize them. But again, there's nothing in the Jubilee year for non-Jewish slaves. There's no benefit for them.
Aaron, can you please finish this chapter? Because you have
Okay,
finished it,
thank you.
actually.
All right. If a foreigner residing among you becomes rich, and any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to the foreigner or to a member of the foreigner's clan, they retain the right of redemption after they have sold themselves. One of the relatives may redeem them. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative in the clan may redeem them. Or if they prosper, they may redeem themselves. They and their buyer are to count the time from the year that they sold themselves up to the year of Jubilee. The price for their release is to be based on the rate paid to a hired worker for that number of years. If many years remain, they must pay for their redemption a large share of the price paid for them. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, they are to compute that and pay for their redemption accordingly. They are to be treated as workers hired from year to year. You must see to it that those whom they owe their service do not rule over them ruthlessly. Even if someone is not redeemed in any of these ways, they and their children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. I'm Rick James, bitch.
Okay,
Never
I'll
gets
start
old.
I'll start my comment here. Verse 40. Until the year of Jubilee. Levine comments, this provision differs from the laws of Exodus 21, verses 1 to 6, and Deuteronomy 15, verses 12 to 18, both of which set the limit of service at 6 years. According to our legislation, indenture may last as long as 50 years. If contrasted with actual slavery or with serfdom, which continues through the generations, our law is relatively lenient. But compared with the other laws of the Torah, it is most severe and allows for almost lifelong indenture. This could, of course, occur under the laws of Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 15, in cases where the indentured servant insists on remaining with his master for any of a variety of reasons. End quote. Milgrom writes that Chazal in the Mishnah Kedushin 1:2 harmonized between the 7th and 50th year manumissions by interpreting until the year of Jubilee that if the Jubilee interrupts the 7-year indenture, the debtor goes free. And that the word Olam in Exodus 21:6 and Deuteronomy 15:16 means until the Jubilee, as the Talmud Kiddushin 14b renders. They further suggested that Exodus 21 refers to a slave that is sold by the court, and Leviticus 25 to a slave that sells himself. Milgrom also notes that 50 years seems to be the maximum period for mortgaging a man for debt, both in Nuzi and the Seleucid Babylonia.
So actually, I think so. Nahan has a pretty good note here on this. So yeah, so from Exodus, if you purchase a male Hebrew slave, right? So kind of specific there. But yeah, as has been demonstrated by Levinson in a recent article, so it takes up the that section of Exodus as well as the law's conclusion in 21:6. He may serve him forever, but suppresses any reference to the Hebrew slave, since H, contrary to the Covenant Code and to Deuteronomy, denies that Israelites can be slaves and reapplies instead the Covenant Code's provisions to foreign nations. Levinson pointed out that the Covenant Code's slave law thus receives in H a new interpretation, quite at odds with the original intent, that restricts it to non-Hebrew slaves. Possibly this rule could be based on the precedent found in Deuteronomy 15. In addition, the observation that the expression in verse 44, the nations surrounding you, is characteristically Deuteronomistic, could suggest an allusion here to the traditional promise in the Deuteronomic Law Code, or in Deuteronomy, and prophetic literature that Israel will dominate over foreign nations, which is also found in the context of the legislation of Deuteronomy 15 in verse 6.
And if anybody noticed that P-Town disappeared,
Yeah,
I
he
just
said he had
wanted
a
to read the
that's the
note
thing.
that he said, "I have been summoned to go reap the harvest of Costco."
Verse 41. The wife is not. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'll get to you.
Verse 41. The wife is not mentioned in this verse. Milgrom asserts that it is a mistake to assume that the wife is taken for granted. He notes that when the subject switches to the non-Israelite, the female slave is specified, but when it reverts to the Israelite slave, only he and his children are released by the Jubilee, with the wife missing. He notes that in Mesopotamia, the creditor has the right to seize the wife and the children, according to Hammurabi 116, 117, and 119, and Middle Assyrian laws 39, 44, and 48. And that the Bible records the indenture of children as a means of paying off debt, as seen in Second Kings 4 verses 1 to 7 and Nehemiah 5:5. He further writes, "I submit that one has to consider seriously the possibility that Leviticus deliberately omits any mention of the Israelite's wife in order to make a legal statement. She does not leave the creditor's service because she does not enter it." Here, Leviticus is conducting a tacit polemic against Exodus 21 verses 7 to 11. The wife may not be indentured. What then is the meaning of the emphasis provided by the repeated mention of the release of the children, as in verses 41 to 45? There again, Leviticus is waging a polemic against the earlier slave law, but this time verbally. Exodus 21:4 states that if the master provides the slave with a wife, quote, "the wife and her children belong to the master, and he, i.e. the slave, is released alone," end quote. No, says Leviticus. Even if the master provides him with a wife, she is entirely free of the master's control, and her children are released with the hireling at the Jubilee, end quote.
But not her.
No. Oh, wait, she's entirely, even if the master provides him with a wife, she's entirely free of the master's control. And I think, no.
No, but it says in the previous, it said in Exodus, and again, they'll have something similar in Deuteronomy, that if he goes in with a wife, he is to come out with a wife. If, however,
What if
his
he goes in and
master-
out with a wife?
Yeah, well, that's
And
private
then-
business.
That
then he
would
gets
make
more
somebody
kids.
back
If he-
then. Going in and out of somebody was what made them your wife.
Yeah, pretty much. But if he goes into servitude without a wife, and his master shall give him a wife, then she and their children shall be her master's. But if he says at the end of the 6 years, when he's supposed to be let go, "No, I love my master and my wife and children, and I do not want to be set free," then he can be made a slave forever and pierced through the ear with an awl. So yeah, you definitely have two different lines of thought here, but it does explicitly say in the text, although that doesn't obviously speak to traditional interpretations, that if his master gives him a wife, she stays. She's still the master's property, even when he's worked off his debt. How that would interact with the year of Jubilee or his right to redeem her if he could get money, I don't know. That would probably be something for later rulings.
Yeah, who needs consent when you're already God's property?
And women didn't really have. I mean, used women didn't have a resale value.
That thought.
Yeah.
Are-
I got
are
another
not a
comment from
context.
Eric Wander, and says, "Rah rah rah! Thanks, guys, for doing what you do. Awesome work. Thank you very much for that."
About verse 44, from the nations around you. The Sifra claims that this does not include the Canaanites, which Milgrom sees as an attempt to harmonize this rule with the Deuteronomic order to annihilate the Canaanites in Deuteronomy 20:16, and the priestly order to drive them out in Numbers 33:52. This, however, is refuted by the next verse. And verse 45, the temporary residents living among you. More accurate will be the children of aliens the children of aliens resident among you in KJV and JPS. Milgrom writes that the intent of this verse is to add indigenous non-Israelites of whatever origin to foreigners in verse 44 as a source of slaves.
So we don't have a dreamer's bill, is what you're saying.
I don't know what a dreamer's bill is, sorry.
It's
I
a
know what
reference
you
to
mean.
an American legal point.
Oh,
I'm not an American, but I'm close enough to hear a good deal of your news. So
Okay.
What continent
Sorry
do you
about
live
that.
on?
Whom?
Okay.
Okay.
Obviously, we are not.
Wait, I have two more comments, and
Okay.
and then I'm done. Verse 47, a member. The Hebrew is ekel, which is a hapax. KJV renders stock, in JPS and BDP, offshoot. Targum Pseudo-Jonathan renders the stock of a strange religion to serve him or to worship with him who is of the generation of strangers. Ibn Ezra derives it from the root ein kuf resh, to uproot. And so akar refers to one who uproots himself from the status of the alien and converts to Judaism. Milgrom notes that this term is found in Old Aramaic, as seen in Daniel 4:12, 20, and 23, and Ethiopic, ekre, a term translated to offspring. And finally, on verse 53, Levine comments, the duty to redeem an Israelite relative indentured to a non-Israelite is exceptional. To allow fellow Israelite to remain indentured to a Gentile will be a cruel humiliation, and one was not permitted to remain indifferent in such a situation, which could lead to forfeiture of land mortgaged to debts and its seizures by non-Israelites, end quote.
And this is how we know that this is the one God of all people for all time across the cosmos, because Jews get better treatment, different treatment than other people. It's only humiliating if a Jewish person is a slave. It's not humiliating to be a slave to a Jew.
Well, I would say that maybe it's more accurate to say Israelite, because Jews are derived from Israelite.
Forgive me. Correct. All right, so obviously we're not going to be moving on to the next two chapters, the last two chapters of Leviticus. We're running out of time for all that, and it wouldn't be wise to do one chapter anyway, even if we could squeeze it in. So we're going to be doing these on. Is everybody's good for Wednesday?
Yeah.
I might not be. I'll see how I'm feeling, because on Tuesday I need to get my wisdom teeth removed.
You need to what?
I need to get my wisdom teeth removed. So I'm not excited.
Well,
for
if you're
that
not
at all.
going to have any wisdom left,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
what good are you?
that's it.
Yeah.
Intelligent design right there.
Yeah,
Oh!
right. No, I luckily the way that my wisdom teeth grew in, they haven't been like a problem at all. They grew straight up like a normal tooth.
Lucky.
But they
Lucky.
they still need to come out. But
Jinx.
the thing is, it'd probably be easy, right? Because they grew in like that. So yeah. I was mostly worried about having to be knocked out for it, because that shit's terrifying to me. So
It's
I
funny
was
that you and I have that same condition. I do not like general anesthesia. I've gone through surgeries twice,
Yeah.
where I'm awake,
right. Yeah.
and where the anesthetic was an ordeal and still didn't work. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So like I'm just gonna go with the local anesthetic. It works just fine. I know it's gonna hurt either way, right? And like people are like, oh, you're gonna remember them like pulling the teeth out. And I'm like, I'm fine with that. All right. I don't want to be knocked out. Because I know that like after that, like for at least a day, right, you have a problem forming memories, and that no, none of that.
I had to be knocked out because my intelligent design included one tooth laying on its side and another one coming in blocked on top of it. So they had to get cutty up in there.
I had two parts that looked like a demon claw on one side,
Eric.
so I was the same way. Mom was terrified.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, even if they got to do some cutting or whatever, like, listen, like, I don't want to say that I'll grit my teeth and do it, because I won't be gritting my teeth in that moment. But yeah, I'm just gonna push through it. If I was looking up,
Lawrence, I feel for you, because I was there, and then I went to have a procedure where they insisted, no, you can't. People did this back in the day. They would do this without the. Well, they used to do surgeries without any anesthetic, and every surgery was done without anesthetic once upon a time. But people don't do this on a local anesthetic. You have to have. I encourage you, please do this. Where hospital policy will not allow you not to, and so they forced me to do the general anesthetic.
ugh.
And it is kind of a weird experience. because when they roll on the anesthetic and you're watching it, I remember looking at the doctor and say, this ain't doing a damn thing. But I don't think I quite got the sentence out, because a second later, it was several hours later, and I was in a different room.
Yep.
Right. So let me just ask. So from your perspective, did it just like snap to the next moment, or is it like, or were you experiencing, like, I don't know, like were you like dreaming or something? I don't know.
No, I will say unequivocally, there was no dream.
Aaron, I'm not
It
sure
was-
about you, but did you hear everything really, really loudly? Because I've had it 3 or 4 times when I've had to be knocked out. I had to have a teeth pulled once because I have a very small mouth. This was actually before my wisdom teeth, which I also had to be knocked out for. But both times I noticed that when I was going under, I was hearing people talk, and I thought, this is not affecting me. And then I was, as you just said, a few hours later waking up, and everything was just so loud and very disorienting, and I was seeing bright colors. So
no, I didn't have any after effect. I just woke up in another room. I just woke up. I would just here I am conscious in another room, and it's several hours later, and I feel nothing of the surgical procedure or anything. It's just it's over and done. And so I've gone through the general anesthetic a couple of times now, and it's not terrifying for me anymore. I'm one of those people that when I'm in my 20s, where everybody drinks too much, right? I would be terrified of drinking so much that I pass out. I would struggle to do whatever I could to walk it off, because I didn't want to be put down. And that was the issue with the general anesthetic too. But I
you
just
have
came to a
trouble
point where you
sleeping?
just kind of have to do that. There's no dream. It's I look at it like it's as terrifying as death isn't. I mean, there are people who are afraid of being dead. I don't have a problem with being dead. I have a problem with how you get dead. Because getting dead can hurt a lot. Getting dead can be a struggle and terrifying, but being dead ain't shit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but still, like the idea of like not being able to form memories for like a whole day. Like I got
It
shit to
feels
do.
like-
It is weird
It
as
feels
hell.
like
I
going
got
to
shit to
sleep
do.
to me.
Like so I don't want to
Yeah.
like miss like a whole day of anything. Like I know I won't be doing much even afterwards, right? But like if I
No.
still have my mental capabilities, I could still maybe do something productive.
Okay, well, as I remember from general anesthetic, there was no effect on mentality. I wake up stone sober, acute, and alert. It's just several hours later. That's the difference.
So the fun
So
thing about
it's like a
anesthetic,
switch. They just switch your brain off, and then it flips back on a few
That's
hours
such an
later.
uncomfortable idea.
it is weird, yeah. But the thing of it is, we don't actually understand why anesthetic works, which is why it affects everyone differently. We know that it works. We mostly understand how it works, but we don't know why it works. So you'll have some people who wake up perfectly crystal clear. You'll have some people who wake up and their senses aren't quite calibrated. You'll have
I
some
have the-
people, in my case, I woke up, I was 100% conscious, but I had zero energy. It was like trying to move a zombie body. There was no connection between my brain and my muscles. I wasn't paralyzed, but I had no strength. But my
I just
mind
wanna-
was fully there.
I just want to say real quick, I'm muting you because I don't like medical talk. So
Okay. Well,
Sorry, I've got a-
sometimes you half wake up and hit on your own wife. There's always that video.
So I would encourage you, Lawrence. My limited experience was that there was nothing terrifying about it. It's just they roll that on. You're like, oh no, I'm perfectly fine. I'm feeling great and everything. And then it's 5 hours later, and there's no after. For me, there were no after effects, physical or mental. I don't know what my immaterial supernatural soul was doing the entire time that it wasn't capable of dreaming either. That's a weird thing.
Right.
It's
is.
almost as if there is
Screaming in pain.
Have you ever been
'Cause
knocked
the
out
thing is-
like traditionally?
Like the thing is, the one time that I was knocked out was it was actually after I got the first COVID shot. Like I was like waiting in the room or whatever, and I just passed out. Like, and the thing is, I was standing at the time, so I woke up like immediately after. Like it just kind of looked like I was going into third person, like transitioning from first person to third person in like a video game. That's how I described it.
Skyrim.
Oh, you had an,
Yeah.
you had an NDE.
So I woke up like on the ground, and like I had my mask on, right, and there was like blood all over my mask because I had just busted my face, and
Wait, this is from you getting the shot?
yeah. Some people have had that reaction. Yeah, the vasovagal.
Whoa. Okay, I had no idea.
Yeah,
Please
that's
continue.
that's why when I got my shots and everything, they would make us sit down for like what is it, 20 minutes or something like that
Yeah,
to make
yeah.
sure that you're
Wow.
okay before they let you go.
I never knew about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
the thing
this
is,
is interesting.
I think a lot of it probably had to do with anxiety, right? Because like I just don't like the idea of shots in general. Like I've had like local anesthetic plenty of times, so like I know what to expect with that. I don't really have any issues with that one. But yeah, the idea, I think the idea itself is really weird because you're putting something into your body that you cannot get out. It's in there now. Like just and I understand why. Like it's medical stuff, and I know that it's good, but
Fascinating phobia.
like it's as a concept, it's weird. So
It's not that different from falling asleep.
Well, except that you're not actually asleep. You're
Right,
off.
right. That's the thing. You're off. Like,
You're not helping, Art. You're scaring the boy.
I'm talking from an experiential point of view. You just go to sleep and you don't dream, and we don't always dream, and you toss and turn less than I do, at least.
It's not the lack of dreams that weirded me out. It was the coming awake with no sense of lost time. It was just later.
yeah, and the thing is, like, is that because I know that people are like loopy after it, right?
Well, time travel does that.
Yeah, so like I don't necessarily
Oh, man.
want, like, what if I say some stupid shit? Like I know that everyone does that, but I don't want to say some stupid shit. So like
It
Yeah,
could be really sweet
I
shit.
hear you.
Jehovah's
So I'm going to read a
Witnesses
couple
were
comments that have
right.
accrued. I'm going to read a couple comments that have built up here. Skeptics and Scoundrels offers $5 and says,
Yeah.
"I love Anastasia. Forced sleep. Sign me up."
fuck that. Forced sleep. Like, oh yeah, let me just control your mind to do what I want it to do. That no. As a concept, so fucking freaky, man.
If we had a
Yeah,
sleeping
well,
pill
I
that could
understand
do
why you'd be
that,
upset
I
about
would
it. We've
take
already
it.
seen how you reacted to the inserting of the tracking chip. Now you're at the mercy of my 5G. Thomas Susheki offers $1.99 and says, "Good luck, Lawrence." Majestic P. Beck offers $20 Canadian and says, "Thanks, guys." Thank you very much for that. Jason Jones offers $2 and says, "An anesthetized Aron Ra is a cute Aron Ra."
Well, if he was lying in a chair, it would be more obtuse, but whatever.
Oh,
Math
man, I'm gonna have to
humor.
practice this name. Pavelos Lozovskis. Pavelos Lozovskis. Fuck, I thought I was going to get it. Sorry. Offers €2 and says, "Since there's 20 minutes to waste, 25 degrees Celsius and cloudy in LT." Where is
Lithuania.
LT? Lithuania. Okay, thank you. All right, and now getting back to the business of this. So we're not going to have Lawrence, and so the Saturday after that, we're not going to have me either.
Well, we'll see
I'm
how I
gonna be
feel.
in the-
Is the thing.
I'm going to
See
be
how-
on the eastern. I'm going to be in Ontario. I'll be in Sarnia, Ontario, the part of Canada that is not burning right now.
Yeah, there's a couple different pockets that aren't on fire. There's like 3 or 4.
Yeah. So that's where I'll be today. Yeah, giving a speech at the conference there. So everybody welcome to come. Pay your admission and all that.
The largest
Anyway.
airport near me is closed because the only planes that are allowed in the air right now are firefighting planes. So have fun.
and all the roads around you are closed too.
Oh, just the major highway leading on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
So
it would be a 20-hour drive. So
Yeah, because it's all windy through the Rockies to get out of there.
yeah, but the prairies are freakishly long, and getting the long way, like across the bulk of Ontario, also really long. Also, I
Yeah.
would probably fall asleep at the wheel in the prairies because it's just endless flat. They literally warn people if you're going to have a slight curve in the road.
That's actually very
Interesting.
thoughtful. We don't do that in like Kansas and Nebraska and whatnot. And so if you zone out, bloop, you find out it's not as flat as you thought because there is a ditch.
There is a ditch. Okay. Or you end up on the wrong side of the road, which is always fun.
All right. So what we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to take a break from Blasphemers Bible, and that means that we won't be back in August at all. We will see you in. There's a song about this. See you in September. Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
See, the worst part that's going to suck for me is not being able to smoke.
I'm so sorry.
That's the killer right there. Not smoking.
Well,
Is there any other day?
as a
Is there
person
any other
who's
day
had
we could do it?
several teeth removed, I can tell you can just ignore that line. You'll get dry socket possibly, but
Yeah.
But hey, there's these nifty toothpicks that can help with smoking less.
All right. Well, best of luck to you, Lawrence, and we will not go without you. I will be meeting with Josh Bowen this coming weekend, a week from today, and I am going to pitch because I do want to see that show. I want to see you have that conversation with Francesca Stavrakopoulos. I'm going to pitch for that, and through everybody I know, all the common friends we have, and see if we can put that together.
I appreciate that, Arn.
Yeah. All right. So see you in September.